My Halo and Metroid videos took a lot of time to edit, and the view count hasn't been that much differently so far, so I'm going to go back to just freeform, talking and drawing over things and going into my process, because I've got a few other projects I kind of want to knock out before the year's over. Okay, so I had this idea for sort of Dark Souls style children's book, and I just wanted to do some style explorations and see, based off of how I stylize the character, what Solaire is going to look like. Then I can kind of figure out the shape language of the environments and things like that. The first thing I wanted to establish was, like how rubbery is he? So I kind of went with that classic Disney rubber hose style of posing and sort of round shapes, round hands. I really liked the juxtaposition between the sort of deadly world of Dark Souls and a children's book. I thought it'd be a fun challenge to how can we take all of these designs and scenarios that are inherently gothic and dark and kind of evil, and what if we made them into a children's book? So what if in my head, at least each page or each set of pages would be a scenario that Solaire found himself in. Now it's been a couple years since I did this, so I can't remember the exact through line of the story, but there'd be a story that was taking him from place to place in the books. So you can see I kind of had one where he's taking cover, right, covering his head as he's running through. He's on the bridge that I think the classic bridge where the dragon spits all this fire at you, and Solaire's kind of running across it, right? It's taking you across the page, and I wanted to include a lot of sort of iconic scenes that everyone would know if they've played the game. Here, I believe this is supposed to be the gaping dragon, and he's got his foot stuck in the gaping dragon's mouth, and he's trying to get out of it. You've got the big pillars here, and going back to that rounder shape language, I had the gaping dragon's head and mouth be pretty round, and again a lot softer. And then same thing as the actual room itself is rounding, so you've got this wacky perspective going on, and the pillars themselves are a lot more lively and round. Another idea I had for a page with the dragon, again if we split it down the middle, but you've got the dragon flying off this way, and then Solaire is kind of doing a Flintstones where he's riding the back of the tail of the dragon, and you kind of got again those rubber hose sort of squiggly arms as he's coming off screen this way. Other ideas I had was maybe he meets Calamite, right? So you've got some text, which I think I did some scribbles here for what the text would be of the page, and he's kind of interested, and he's got again this nice, I feel that I like this pose and the sort of stature of him, and he's looking up, and again that's taking the viewer to the next page, which has the dragon Calamite, and you can kind of follow. He's got nice, a strong shape language, a strong, sharp, but playful shape language, and that kind of takes us off to the next page. And you can kind of see the simplified but round plant style I was going for, and obviously I ended up taking this image, this Solaire image, and using that as my kind of again setting the tone for, okay, how do I want to render him so then I can do all the environments in that way. And I had quite a few. Obviously number one is the one I ended up settling on, but I had a more kind of flat style with a softer style lighting. Actually, I guess this is the flattest style, and you've got this nice softer light here, and you've kind of got a different color palettes going on. It's pretty similar color palette, but just how I wanted to light him, or if I wanted to light him. And then here's the totally flat base. You've got this nice feather, right? It comes to a point. You've got the big sort of oven mitt hands, I think of it and he's got the big pants, right? And these really large feet. I really like this rendering style I went with. I used the Procreate watercolor brushes, and they came up with this really, really nice texture. So I like that, being able to layer in the shadows. Again, they're subtle. You don't want them to be too harsh. You want it to be pretty bright and lively. You want to use some pops of saturated colors, since this would be for kids. I also, I was thinking okay, do I want more texture, right? You've got a lot of texture going on, or would I want the sort of subtler, softer watercolor look? And that's the look I ultimately decided on. And then I think for this one was supposed to be in the Duke's archives, so this would be rows of books, and then this is Solaire here, and he's kind of on one of those cartoony big ladders that you can slide around on. I don't even know if those are actually in the game, but he'd be on them perusing the books, and in the background you've got the different layers of the archives. And then here you have the sun god statue or something like that. There's a big spear and a crumbled statue, and then you have sort of clouds up here, and you've got the mountains in the distance. This is right by after you run through this bridge, actually on the other side where the bonfire is. You kind of got a back area. There's like one undead over there. And yeah, it's got like some nice foliage and then these little like, sort of layered brick here. And then it kind of is where it meets the foliage. And again, you've got this old ancient statue. So I've got, Solaire here, again, with striking a nice expressive pose. And he's kind of looking like maybe he's looking at the sun. Maybe he's looking at where the statue's head used to be, something like that. And I've got all of, the plants kind of pointing at him, saying like, hey, look at me. And again, this would be another full page spread, and we'd be going to the next one, and you could fit text here. And then so I kind of want to go on to the style exploration, like what sort of finish I was looking for, what are other paintings that I've done that I could reference to. So I've done quite a few like stylized books for children, whether it's more like textbooks, like scientific textbooks, or just book covers or the actual pages for a story. We can start off by looking at my, so this was inspired by The Lion and the Mouse, right? This again would be a full page spread. You've got the mouse running across this way, the lion kind of looking back, and you've got the waves of the lion's fur as the mouse is running across the rope. I still really like this piece. I did this, I don't even know, because again, this was back in school. So this is like, oh gosh, 5 years ago or something like that. And yeah, I really like the flow of the rope as the lion is trapped in it, and you can kind of see him looking back, bring our attention to the mouse, but the mouse is taking our, eye back the other way. If I get rid of all the red lines, I really, really like the texture. I remember this took me a long time to figure out the texture of the mouse and how I wanted it to look. And then I kind of made sure to have the glow of the ears, as you've got this brilliant, yellow light source over here. And I just wanted that to show through the ears a little bit. And yeah, overall, I think I found a good balance of having like texture and the transitions of the light, as well as a textured brush I used, to draw everything. And I have like my layout here, and again, going back to which I'll call back to it later, but in terms of the page layout ideas, I kind of had to do a page layout for how I wanted the entire Lion and the Mouse book to look. And then I took, this page a lot farther with some color explorations, initial sketch. Originally the eyes were a lot more cartoony, and then I finally settled on this one. And then, I'll kind of speed along here, but another book, this is my mock-up for a book, but it was called The Home for Hubert and Harriet, and it's about like two spiders trying to find a place to settle and make their new home, right? So the cover's got them in space, and it's kind of vignetted with this nice, the two, like, I guess like their breathing apparatuses for their space, helmets, and then it's kind of wrapped around, space. And so I had like one, they're in the jungle here, and again, I feel like not only the shape language is something I would be looking at for, again, to refer to, which I guess I forgot to mention. The point of bringing this texture in is because I know I wanted something like that. I actually think these versions are a little closer to the brush I used over the watercolor, but I knew I wanted something playful, right, with texture, because you want to be able to keep a kid's attention. And then I think the shape language is much more prevalent here in terms of what I would be going for with like this sort of overly exaggerated large foliage and large leaves and stuff like that. So you've got them in a jungle, you've got them underwater, you want to keep it playful. The wife has the little bow on her head, and then the husband's got the little tie, right? And they've got, snorkeling masks when they're underwater. And then kind of same for Solaire. It's like you want to put them in different scenarios for each page. It's entertaining for the kids. So here it's like they're trying to move into a bear's den, right? But you can see that the bear's already here. And then here they found like a little tomato patch or something. And this is more of a spot illustration. So rather than a double page, you've just got like hey, why don't I play with the shape a little bit and make a spider web, and then make the painting within the spider web. This was for a full project, actually, for this YouTube channel a few years ago, that it was going to be like an animatic of Little Red Riding Hood. So I kind of like the shape language I got with the wolf, and then with Little Red Riding Hood as well, right? Like she's super simplified, maybe a little too simplified depending, but she's got a strong arc this way, and then he's, sort of leering at her. This way, it'd be split almost right down the middle. You don't want to cut off anything too much. But then, yeah, I wanted some foreground elements. And then again, the texture I'd definitely be referencing for the Dark Souls children's book because I really liked, I think I used a similar brush as the lion and the mouse one, but I like the sort of almost wooden, use like maybe a graphite or charcoal pencil. Yeah, that kind of wooden texture that's coming across. This was like an alternate version. It was a lot more painterly. I actually did this one first, and then I thought it'd be cool to vignette it with like an old school map style of texture. But I ultimately decided against it just because I thought that it wouldn't really work for kids as much. It's a little too, the color palette's not as saturated and the over rendering of everything, even though I did try and like make some stronger outlines here to make these rocks stand out in the foreground. I just feel like it didn't really suit the audience I was looking for. And this is like the original sketch concept I had. So you can see I always wanted Red to be very simplified, and then for the wolf to kind of be, leering over her. And so I thought like having, him in the shadow, right, and her in the light worked as well. And then ultimately I decided on something honestly a bit darker. That's probably partially why I was like, maybe this is a bit too far. But yeah, I like the layers, and again, the playful shape language of the cartoonish vines, right, kind of coming in, the shrubs just being these little like mounds in the background is really nice. And then this was a mock cover for Around the World in 80 Days. You can see I have my spot illustration. I made a little chapter illustration here, and then that's what the cover looks like. And same thing, this would be like more of a flat textureless actually kind of shadow with the light on this side, and then just the details would be using a texture brush. But I really like the colors here, I like the composition here, and again, I'm trying to find a middle ground between all of this when I was working on this book, because I thought like, okay, the watercolor is nice, but maybe I have the character be flat and then I have the environments be rendered. These are things you have to think about. It's like, how exactly do I want the character to stick out more, or do I want them to kind of blend in, right? And it just kind of depends on what your design goals are. This is like for a science textbook or something like that. So the text would be written here and here, and it's about a mantis shrimp, right? So I like gave the mantis shrimp, same thing, a lot of texture, but it's obviously that it's not as heavily stylized because you want it to be a little bit more truer to life, even though you're making an illustration, you're not trying to copy it one-to-one, but you don't want to give it like, crazy wacky proportions or anything like that. And then here's a little like sketch I did for a Parisian cafe. Actually, this is animated. I'll probably insert that in post if I can find that animation. And it now serves as my Patreon board at the end of my videos, because I thought it worked well with a little menu here. But yeah, this is ideally, I think this is what I always pictured if I were to, revisit this Dark Souls children's book thing. This is probably the style I would go for. I really enjoy the offsetting of the base color. I like the line work. I think it's a perfect level of simplified, but also a lot of detail. The color is nice and light. It's not too heavy. I could easily, already in my head I can picture it, but I could easily translate this to a more medieval style. And these are some other render explorations and supporting comps. Mostly these were other projects. Well, some of these were other projects in school. Okay, this was the only thing done in school actually. But again, you've got like these characters, right? They've got nice, clear, readable postures and things like that. And the shape language is very exaggerated. You can tell who the villain is, right? You can tell who the good guys are. They're even connected by, their color palette. And the texture is more prevalent here. But again, I'm not even sure what type of texture you would call this, because it's just like a custom brush I made some years ago now. But yeah, again, this is more so I think now what I'd go for the Dark Souls book rather than the watercolor, even though I do like that for the individual character exploration. This is like a goofy character I was working on. It's actually part of this project, believe it or not, which is taken a lot of different forms. But just working on how can I simplify shapes, simplify the arm and hands and things like that, and then get really, I'd rather go for this more expressive face than this sort of smaller, not noticeable face if I was making, this Dark Souls book for kids, because you want things to be readable immediately, and you kind of want it to be goofy, right? You want them to have a good time. And I guess I was drawing a hand here, and I just left that in. And then this was for a different children's book exploration for, it's like a kid and his dad, living in Alaska or something like that. So this would have been like a sled. And, same thing. You've got very simplified snow, simplified shapes, but, the texture and color all work pretty well, and I think are very readable and are very agreeable and, hopefully pleasing to the eyes. And then here I've got my Castle Crashers. Actually, I probably should have grouped this with the Hollow Knight illustration, but the Castle Crashers compositions here have a lot of movement to them, right? They've got a lot of expression in the characters and how they're moving, and the actions that they're doing and things like that. So I wanted to refer back to this as a reminder because I think these are very effective and would be a fantastic read for kids, especially when you want to have a little bit more action with knights and dragons and things like that. And so this Hollow Knight illustration, just this fan art I did for fun, I really, really like the movement in this piece, and it's another one that does a good job of taking you from left to right. And it's got, good texture as well. I'd love to do my own sort of medieval fantasy, knight for a kid's book where he's kind of battling through all these different characters, and, you've got all these fun compositions for pages and stuff like that, because I really did enjoy working on all of these things, even though most of the stuff I'm probably posting now is, more so in this quote-unquote realistic direction. I did enjoy doing this stylized stuff. This was like a Viva Pinata study or something like that of the Eagle Air. But for now, it just kind of lives. It just kind of lives in the theoretical. And again, it's a fun project to work on. It flexed my muscles, my creative muscles, in a way that painting, not really, more realistic isn't the right word, because this isn't realism that I'm going for, but the more overly rendered, heavily textured in a different way, style paintings. I enjoy doing that, but all of these are kind of take my artist brain to a different place that I also enjoy, that I really haven't visited in some time. Also, shout out, at one point I did want to do a Bloodborne children's book as well, and just simply for the fact that I could do a pun, play on words. Instead of Goodnight Moon, I could do Goodnight Moon Presents. That's it. That was the whole idea. Thank you to the few people who have subscribed to my Patreon. But yeah, if you're someone who did watch to the end, I really appreciate it. If you found this enjoyable enough to listen to, that's pretty cool. And thank you so much, as always. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.